So I'm going to talk about what is an entrepreneurial mindset, but also try to talk about how this is linked to happiness and well-being. So I think that that's some new content for a lot of you, and I think the implications for life design are pretty obvious. I've got a lot to cover today, so slow me down if I talk too quickly. Wenn ich zu schnell sprechen, Sie müssen etwas sagen, ja? I'm going to talk about what is entrepreneurship, what's an entrepreneurial mindset, what specific beliefs and attitudes I believe are part of an entrepreneurial mindset and why. I think that's some pretty new stuff. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what happiness and well-being is, and why an entrepreneurial mindset might lead to PERMA. And in particular, then, how do you teach this? And I was asked to give a quick demonstration of the Articulate Storyline online learning platform that I'm using. So I got a lot to cover, and I'm going to try to get it all in. So slow me down if you need anything. Why am I interested in this topic? Well, first of all, I'm teaching the largest entrepreneurship course in the world starting in 2.5 months here in the fall. So I'm writing the textbook entirely myself. I'm doing many of the videos myself. And because it's going to be such a highly scalable course with so many students, like, how do you actually teach that? Another big reason why I'm so interested in this topic is there's a real crisis in mental health in today's youth. University, like over 50% of university students are currently diagnosed with a mental disorder. Over half of university students, at least in North America, are currently undergoing medical attention for a diagnosed medical disorder. Yeah, I was talking about the mental health crisis in today's youth. Over a third of my students have actively contemplated suicide in less than the last month. A third. 1 in 4 would say that they have been so depressed in the last month that they couldn't get out of bed for an entire day. This is a crisis. And so this is going to be one of the first university courses that these students will have ever had. It's a new mandatory required course in the curriculum for the largest business school in Canada. And they're leaving home for the first time. They're joining university for the first time. So I think that for a lot of students, this might be the only university course they'll ever have that touches on the subject of mental health, anxiety, depression, suicide, substance abuse, and how an entrepreneurial mindset can help empower them to combat these problems. My primary field of research is entrepreneurship education. And so that's why I'm interested in these topics. I've also written a book previously on entrepreneurial career and life design, which is why I've been talking with Bettina, Barbara, Georg, and this group here. And I did want to have a shout out to Georg. I loved your System 1, System 2 stuff. That was so excellent. Thank you very much. That really helped solidify some important ideas in my mind and take me to the next level. So thank you. So I'm in repaying Georg for his wonderful presentation. I'm contributing this to the overall discussion. So what is entrepreneurship? Well, it's a revolutionary approach to dealing with uncertainty, risk, ambiguity, and change. That almost all university courses are based on the planning-based mindset versus this new entrepreneurial way of thinking around search. So planning, you have known goals in a fairly predictable, stable environment, and you can control the means to achieve these goals if you're a manager with budget. And this is how we teach virtually every business course in the entire curriculum. It's kind of like farming. You know you want tomatoes, so you plant tomato plants. You control the sun and water. Maybe you build a greenhouse, you add some pesticide, and you always get what you plan for. You want tomatoes, you plant tomato plants, you get tomatoes. Search is more like hunting. You pick a desirable direction to test in, but the environment is unpredictable, uncertain, changing. And so you have to look for weak signals and then pivot or persevere. And rather than causal-based reasoning on the planning-based side, we use effectuation. This is Saravathi's groundbreaking work on effectuation theory. The only thing you can really control is your own time, attention, and effort. And so what we know about entrepreneurial searching is this idea of agile, lean, design thinking, rapid prototyping, iterating, and things like that. Rather than controlling a lot of resources, you start with only what you have, your bird in the hand principle. You start with your own time and effort, your own human capital, social capital, and character. And you can control your own attention and focus with proactivity and things like that. Focus on customers, not competitors. That's the crazy quilt principle. Continuous learning and improvement. This is what we know about entrepreneurship, especially on the search-based side of things. And a lot of this comes out of effectuation theory. So, this kind of sort of changes the way that we view what entrepreneurship is, that it's not just starting up a business, but it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of being. And this is something that's fundamental to the human spirit. And you can apply that to starting up a new business. You can apply that to being an intrapreneur, being entrepreneurial inside a company. You can apply that to social change making, active citizenry, political activism, social causes, community change making, but you can also be entrepreneurial towards your own life. You can look at yourself in an entrepreneurial way and say, how can I change who I am to have a happier life with greater well-being? And I call that personal empowerment, or sometimes we call that life design. So I published a bunch of papers on this, on what is entrepreneurship. And this is really the holistic philosophy of entrepreneurship that's been embraced in the EntreTime, the Connect program, and some of the other Train the Trainer programs in Europe. So here's a little quote from the course. Entrepreneurship is not just a business discipline, but it's a different way of seeing, thinking, and acting. And this is what enabled human beings to have a brighter world. Here's that same idea embedded in the mission of my department, that we empower students with this entrepreneurial philosophy that they can apply to these four major domains: their own lives, their jobs, their communities, or their own new ventures. So the course is not primarily concerned with starting a business. It's about learning how to think and act entrepreneurially. Everybody on board with that? Any questions so far? So this is kind of sort of what is entrepreneurship. Okay. So if it's not about starting a business and it's a required course for all students in marketing, finance, accounting, HR, information technology, retail, law, kind of across the entire business school, it's really to encourage students to explore the Toronto Metropolitan University entrepreneurship ecosystem. We've got the largest entrepreneurship ecosystem in the world. We've got 10 on-campus incubators. We've got our own VC fund. We've got our own angel network. We start up over 300 to 400 new companies a year. One of our incubators, the DMZ, which I co-founded, has helped companies raise over $5 billion in financing and has created over 5,000 jobs. So we've got a big, big ecosystem. And I'm trying to encourage students to just get involved. Like, welcome to university. This is kind of a commuter school. Students don't live on campus. They live in Toronto. They commute to school, and then they go home to hang out with their high school friends. So this course is really about getting them involved in their university. So to help them build their interests and strengths, build networks to create an engaging university experience, and then use some of the entrepreneurial tools to either do a potential side hustle, change-making project, or new venture of some sort. And then to search, play, do those entrepreneurial things to discover their ikigai, or what brings them PERMA. And I'll talk about that later. For those of you who don't know, this is the ikigai framework. It's not just about doing what you're good at and what you love, but it's about doing what the world needs and what you could be paid for. And if you bring all this together, this is happiness and well-being, a reason for being. So this is one of the frameworks I use in the course. So we know entrepreneurship is about, there's knowledge, there's the head, the hand, and the heart. There's like tools and methods, and the course has to teach a little bit about this, but it's a new course. And so I didn't want to change any of the courses that come after this that talk about entrepreneurial tools and methods. And we've got 75 different entrepreneurship courses at our university, 75 different entrepreneurship courses. And I didn't want anybody to have to redo any of their courses because now students have this new course. It's about skills and competencies, as you know, from like the EntreComp framework, but also there's this mindset, what we call entrepreneurial attitudes, the mindset. So what's the mindset? I don't think this is controversial for anybody here in this particular room, but there are cognitive antecedents to behaviors and emotions. And this is a complete repudiation of the determinists and the behaviorists who say that you're controlled by like your Pavlov's dog, or you're controlled by fate, destiny, the stars, God, genes, the color of your skin, your socioeconomic conditions. None of that is true. None of that is true. What you think influences what you do. What you think influences how you feel. And the social cognitive theory is the primary psychological framework. And this is, Bandura with his self-efficacy thing. He's the big social cognitive theory, a giant. Theory of planned behavior, theory of reasoned action. Maslow and the humanist psychologists are all part of the social cognitive theory. Humans are not the helpless pawns of fate, destiny, God, genetics. We have agency and free will. And I talk about this a lot in one of my most recent publications, Empowering Students for Future Work and Productivity, which is published in Public Affairs Quarterly. So there's no such thing as an entrepreneurial personality. You're not controlled by how you were born. You've heard about the trait school. And, we've spent decades trying to look at, who can be an entrepreneur. And what we've discovered is there is no entrepreneurial personality. It just doesn't exist. That was just 20 years of research that turned out to be nothing. Social cognitive theory is the most robust and valid predictor of human behavior. But unlike personality, mindset is changeable. Mindset is changeable. So that's the first thing about an entrepreneurial mindset, is to know it's about what you think. It's about the cognitive antecedents to behaviors, and that it's changeable. So the primary structural thing is the theory of planned behavior, or the theory reasoned of action. This is the most well-researched model in the entire field of entrepreneurship. Your beliefs affect your attitudes, affect your intent, which affect your actions. Your beliefs and attitudes are primarily subconscious. Most people don't know what their beliefs and attitudes are, especially their core beliefs. But as you move to the right-hand side, you start to become more consciously aware of what your goals and intent is, what you want to do, and that your emotional feedback, your happiness, is based on the harmony of all of these things. So, some foundational considerations. We have agency and free will, and we can understand and choose and influence these beliefs using techniques adopted from cognitive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, mindfulness, meditation, not mediation, and yoga, introspection, goal setting, habit formation, and things like that. So this course uses a lot of books. I've read over 50 books in the last year around, all of Beck's works on cognitive behavioral therapy, all of Dave Burns' books on feeling good, feeling great, all of Seligman's books on flourishing, learned optimism, happiness and well-being. I've read a lot of stuff about this whole thing. So an entrepreneurial mindset incorporates positive beliefs and attitudes. And so entrepreneurial attitudes like curiosity, like you can't be curious about the world around you if you believe that you live in a world of pain and suffering and malevolence where the world is rigged against you. You can't be resilient and have empathy if your belief is that you're helpless and that the fate or stars control your destiny and things like that. So these entrepreneurial attitudes are based on positive beliefs. And here's a list of some of these positive beliefs. I'm going to talk about these in a bit more detail. But because of that, the course incorporates these concepts, methods, and tools from positive psychology and CBT. So here's some of the books I just mentioned. Now, interesting, things like self-esteem, self-efficacy, internal locus of control, optimism, resiliency, curiosity, growth mindset, these are all highly, highly correlated with happiness and well-being. So you need these things to be entrepreneurial. But if you build these things, they also coincidentally happen to also help you build happiness and well-being. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail here. So let's talk a little bit more about happiness and well-being. And this is a fairly well-researched topic in the last 20 years. There's now like 20 journals on happiness studies. There's been a revolutionary shift since the introduction of positive psychology in the early 2000s. Previously, all psychology was really, how do you help people who are depressed? How do you help people with schizophrenia? How do you help people with post-traumatic stress disorder? How do you help people overcome trauma? Positive psychology says, well, rather than helping people go from -8 to -2, we're going to help people go from +1 to +10. So this is kind of a major fundamental shift in the whole field of psychology, and there's been a lot of happiness things. So, like any new field, there's a lot of contradictions, but basically what I can say is that there's one component of happiness is called hedonic happiness, which is basically high positive emotions and low negative emotions, or what psychologists call affect. Happiness is also bundled in with this thing called eudaimonic happiness, which is basically Aristotle's satisfaction with life. And that especially driven by Seligman and some of these other people, well-being is a broader concept, which is kind of the same thing as PERMA. A combination of happiness plus well-being, that you've got your positive emotions, but you also have engagements, also known as flow. You have relationships, meaning and achievement in your life. And so when I talk about happiness and well-being, I'm really referring specifically to PERMA. And there's a scale for how to measure PERMA. Happiness is something you can have in your own head. Like you can be alone in a room in a jail cell and kind of sort of have happiness. Well-being is a broader concept. You have to actually have positive relationships. You have to actually do things in the world around you. So true well-being is a broader concept. I've been criticized by my colleagues for saying, who are you to tell students they should be happy? You shouldn't be teaching students to be happy. This sets them up for failure. Life isn't about happiness. And I say, no, you're absolutely wrong. Happiness is good. It leads to longevity. It leads to health. It leads to positive life outcomes. Happier people are wealthier, healthier. They live longer. They have better relationships. Happiness is a good thing from top to bottom. There is no bad aspect of being happy. And it forms the foundation for well-being. And in the same way that a positive cycle of happiness generates more happiness and well-being, a negative cycle of depression and anxiety leads to more negative life outcomes. So I want my students to be successful. I want to combat depression and anxiety. So it is my position that happiness is a good in the world. And I know that that is controversial. Some portion of happiness is genetic, about 40%. Some percentage is weakly and temporarily related to life circumstances. But by and large, wealth, marriage, religion, success, job things do not lead to happiness. You've got this thing called hedonic adaptation, which means you get used to it. You get a little bit more money, you spend it. You get used to it. You eat a lot of ice cream cones, you get sick of ice cream cones after a while. Hot dogs are good when you have one of them, but when you had 100 hot dogs, you start to get sick of hot dogs. So the primary source of happiness is based on your beliefs and your attitudes. And this is changeable. This is all changeable through therapy and through positive psychology and through mindfulness and things like that. And so I'm going to show you where these things specifically come from. The science of cognitive behavioral therapy shows that there are 5 primary major negative dysfunctional beliefs. The reason why they're dysfunctional is because they lead to poor function. They lead to bad life outcomes. That's why they're dysfunctional. They're bad for you. First one is negative self-worth. This is thoughts of worthlessness and unlovability. I'm bad, I'm evil, I'm a sinner, nobody loves me, nobody likes me, I'm ugly, I'm fat, there's something wrong with me. And these come right out of the literature. Like, I didn't make any of these up. These are heavily studied. These are the 5 major negative beliefs. Second one is helplessness or incompetence. There's nothing I can do. I'm a failure and there's nothing I can do. I can't get out of this hole I'm in. Another major dysfunctional belief is this negative view of other people. Other people are rotten, they're scoundrels, they're going to hurt me, or they're worthy of disdain. I can harm them, I can kill them, I don't care about other people. And there's 2 aspects of negative worldview. There's the malevolent worldview, that the world is bad, dangerous, a place of suffering and torment. We are cast out of the Garden of Eden into a place of suffering for punishment for our poor behaviors, and that things are going to turn out badly. All 5 of these things result in bad outcomes. In contrast, the 5 primary positive entrepreneurial beliefs are the exact opposite. Instead of worthlessness, we have self-esteem. Instead of helplessness, we have self-efficacy. Instead of negative view, we have empathy. We care about other people. Instead of a malevolent worldview, we have a benevolent worldview. Things turn out well. Instead of things turning out badly, being pessimistic, we're optimistic. And so I've got these scales, if you will, where worthwhileness goes from worthless on one side to positive core self-evaluation, positive self-esteem on the right-hand side. You go from helpless to having a high self-efficacy. You go from thinking other people are bad, hurtful, or stupid to that they're interesting and things like that. I will note that at the far right extreme of each scale is a bad thing. If you think you have too much worth, you're a narcissist. If you think you're too amazing, you're overconfident. If you think people are too wonderful and amazing, you have unconditional love, which is a recipe for tragedy and suffering in your life. On the worldview side of things, it goes from a malevolent universe to a benevolent universe. But if you think everything is too rosy, you've got rose-colored glasses and you're a Pollyanna, and that's not a good thing either. This is where entrepreneurs are like, oh, all my dreams are going to turn real. Maybe not. Maybe not. And then on the control side of things, you go from an external locus of control to an internal locus of control with free will and agency over your life. But at the too far extreme, there are things you just don't control. You don't control death. You don't control sunrises. You don't control other people. So that there's this sweet spot, kind of Aristotle's golden mean, as you will. Okay. So here are the 7 specific entrepreneurial attitudes. So I talk about the 5 specific positive entrepreneurial beliefs that are embedded in my course and that I teach. Here's the 7 specific positive entrepreneurial attitudes. This is not a comprehensive list. These are just the major ones. None of these are surprising, but some of these are highly correlated with happiness. In particular, growth mindset, resiliency, and self-leadership. Very highly correlated with happiness. Creativity, co-creation, and play, not so much. Proactivity, yes. Internal locus of control, highly correlated with happiness. So from cognitive behavioral therapy, we know that you can eliminate negative beliefs and the cognitive distortions they cause. And there's a process, the ABCs of CBT. You identify what the negative belief is, you challenge that negative belief, and then you replace it through positive self-talk. So you think to yourself, oh, if I fail this test, my parents are going to kill me. But you challenge that belief. You say, wait a minute. That's one of the 10 cognitive distortions. That's an overgeneralization, and that's magnification. I'm going to challenge that. Well, my parents actually love me. My parents are not really going to murder me. And then you replace this. You, rather than saying, oh, my parents are going to kill me if I fail this thing, you replace this negative belief with, my parents love me and will support me, but I should try harder. Things like that. This is a difficult course, but I'm going to learn this course by implementing a growth mindset. So this is the process from cognitive behavioral therapy by which you identify and eliminate negative beliefs. But you can eliminate them because they're irrational. They're just not true. When you say, oh, the world's going to end, that's not true. The world is not going to end. That's an irrational negative belief. All negative beliefs are fundamentally irrational. All negative beliefs are fundamentally just not true. And so you can talk yourself out of them by just pointing out what really is true. The trouble with positive beliefs is you can't talk yourself into them. You can't say, oh, I'm a good student, unless you actually do all the work, go to all the classes, and get good grades. So you can talk yourself out of negative beliefs because they're a lie, but you can't talk yourself into positive beliefs unless you take the actions required to make them true. And so this is new on the face of the planet, I would say. This is not supported by the literature. I see no support for this in the existing literature. This is my theory, if you will. This is what I'm proposing, that in order to build positive beliefs, you have to take action. You can't just sit around and dream about having a good world. You actually have to do stuff. And so I use the pedagogical pyramid to show that your higher level mindset, beliefs, and attitudes are based on your lower level actions. And so I teach all of these tools at the lower level, like business model canvas, business model U, how to do fly on the wall interviews. I teach entrepreneurial methods like the IDEO, Stanford Design School stuff, the Double Diamond Pyramid, value proposition design, stuff like that. I teach the entrepreneurial principles and things like bird in the hand, crazy quilt, and stuff like that. And so there are tools, methods, and processes in the course that I cover as well. So basically, what the course is about is to get involved in their university, the Toronto Metropolitan University. Get involved and use this to build your character, human capital, and social capital. That's your bird in the hand. That's the only thing you have. When you're 20 years old, you don't have any money. You don't have a lot of skills. All you've got is your human and social capital. Build that human and social capital. Explore the possibility of starting your own startup or side hustle using the business model you canvas, and then go out and try to discover your ikigai. Go out and do fun stuff. Go out and play and go meet some cool people. Get involved. The course itself is a blended learning, flipped classroom, experiential pedagogy based. Blended learning because there's an asynchronous component. Experiential learning because it's primarily about doing. Flipped classroom because they have to do the asynchronous stuff first and then come into class having already done that. So this is the way almost every university class in North America goes. There's usually 3 hours per class. Usually it's a 3-hour lecture. Because this is a blended learning class, there's 1 hour of asynchronous content using Articulate Storyline, which I'm going to show you in a minute. There's 1 hour in a large classroom where Steve Gideon gets to pretend to be Tony Robbins. I get to be a motivational speaker. I'm thinking about buying laser lights and a fog machine. Just kidding. And then there's a 1 hour lab class where it's taught by a different professor in groups of 45 students or more. of only 45 students. They get extra credit for being involved in extracurricular activities, and that's tracked at our university through what's called TED points. We're the Ted Rogers School of Management. They get TED points for doing by joining a student club, going to a workshop, learning a new skill, getting a badge. They get TED points for. All incoming students are put into a group of 45 students called a TED Pack. They go to all the same classes together and they meet for social events and things like that. So mine is the only course that's kind of like taught kind of in harmony with these TED Packs. There's 8 weekly assignments. They either get a 0 or full marks. Their weekly assignments must be grammatically perfect or they get a 0. This was a fairly major, highly negotiated aspect of this course, that in order to make room for this new course in our core curriculum, they had to get rid of another course. And the course they decided to get rid of was the communication course. So I said, I can't teach students English in one semester on top of entrepreneurship and cognitive behavioral therapy and all this other stuff. There's a real problem in North American universities because of budget reductions that we're increasingly getting international students who don't speak English. And, they kind of make it through 4 years without ever actually learning how to write. And I think that it's really important to set them off on a good foundation to say, if you're going to be successful in university, you got to learn how to use the appropriate, tools like Grammarly and Chat GPT and things like that. You just have to be able to write well. So if they don't write at least at a minimum certain level, they get a 0. They can revise that assignment up to 2 times. If they get it right the first time, they get 100%. They've got an additional 2 weeks to get an 80%, which is still an A-. They got an additional 2 weeks to get a 60%, which is still a C-. But if they get it wrong all 3 times, they get a 0. And there's lots of support systems at our university, and lots of stakeholder coordination with the support services of the university. Here's some of the topics that I cover. I talk a lot about change and the need for entrepreneurship to be able to adapt to change. I talk about the fact that they're going to be looking for a new job probably every 3 years for the entire rest of their lives on average, which means that the average 20-year-old goes to at least 20 to 25 different jobs over the course of their lives. So this having a gig and a side hustle and a change-making project on top of your job becomes kind of a core part of building your ikigai or building your career. I talk about the importance of startups. I talk about planning versus searching, mindfulness journaling. I talk about that stuff. Business model U and the business model canvas are kind of sort of core kind of cognitive aspects of this course. I talk about bird in the hand. Some of these are learning outcomes kind of imposed through our accreditation system, like the stages of business and the company life cycle. That kind of comes out of our accreditation requirements. I talk a little bit about business planning and strategy before talking about design thinking and lean startup. So I talk about both sides. I talk about both the planning side as well as the search-based side. Goal setting, habit formation, and time management. And then finally, I've got a couple of chapters on anxiety, depression, and cognitive therapy, and how to build sources of happiness and well-being. So those are the primary kind of modules and topics in the course. Here's the 8 major assignments. The first one is just a pretty simple email, but it's all about like find a role model, find an important person, and demonstrate that you can write an email properly. Then there's a future visioning exercise. I've used this one in the past a lot to say, who do you want to become over the next 4 years? And not a single student says, I'm going to learn how to be a free rider. I'm going to get D minuses in every course. I'm going to try to do as little as possible. I'm going to never join a student club. I'm going to have absolutely nothing to say on my resume other than the fact that I got some degree. They all say positive things about their grades and about what they're going to do. And I think that sets them off on a good goal setting thing. I think students lose that sense of ambition over the years, and they start settling for like doing as little as possible. I have two assignments related to the business model U Canvas. The first one is a purpose statement, which is what do you love doing for who? Just 3 of the 9 elements. Then there's a video pitch of their unique selling proposition. Basically, what's my human capital? What's my unique skill? What's my sustainable competitive advantage? What's that stuff? What's that part of my ikigai that I love to do and I'm amazing at? They have to go to a couple of networking events and document their active listening skill development practice that they do. I have a lot of focus on conscious practice, and so go out there and consciously practice your active listening. Of course, I've got to have a self-reflection exercise. That's kind of, a big, important pedagogical tool in almost every entrepreneurship class is self-reflection. But it's a self-reflection using the Gibbs cycle on, how have you built the entrepreneurial attitude of proactivity? How have you built the entrepreneurial attitude of curiosity? How have you built the entrepreneurial attitude of growth mindset? How have you built the entrepreneurial attitude of internal locus of control? Then they've got a public speaking event about something that they care about and find important. And then finally, a business model U report. So what I'm showing you now is, this isn't exactly how the students are going to see it. So I'm in what's called the Rise 360 authoring tools from within the Articulate Storyline learning platform. This is the content creation side. These get exported as a SCORM object, which gets imported back into the learning management system of my university, which is called D2L. And so the student experience will be a little bit different than this. The students have to do all the content. When you're in the authoring tools, you can kind of sort of skip around without doing everything. And so I'm showing you this from the authoring side of things, just because it's easier. So for example, this is week 3 as I'm introducing the business model U. So it starts with the review of previous weeks. Here's a simple interactive learning object. So is this something to do with the head, the heart, or the hand? So memorizing, let's see. Oh, that's based on knowledge. Writing is a skill. Building a website is a skill. Lean startup methods is knowledge. Communication is a skill. Self-efficacy is an attitude. Self-esteem is an attitude. Hypothesis testing. That sounds like a skill. Yeah, I got that one right. Resiliency, that's an attitude. Adaptability is an attitude. Resource acquisition is a skill. Teamwork is a skill. You get the idea. So we've got these interactive kind of sort of things you can do. Here's another one. Is this planning-based left side or search discovery on the right side? So effectuation is search. Control all aspects is business planning. Pivot or persevere, that's search. Imagine a future goal, then figure out what actions you need. Oh, that's the business planning. That's causal logic, mostly taught in these programs. Experiential step. Oh, that's this one. Starting where you are, that's the bird in the hand principle. So you can see we've got these interactive things that students can play with in this environment. Looks pretty. It's a nice platform for writing content. You can insert images. It looks nice. You can embed these videos right in the thing.
Tim with Business Model U.
You can track that they're seeing these videos in real time. You can have these interactives like what's this one? Match the 9 business model elements. Okay, how customers will know you. That looks like distribution channels. How you interact. Oh, that's customer relationships. Who you help. That's customers. What you get, revenue. What you give, those are costs. Who helps you, those are partners. Anyway, you get the idea. You put all these things together, and then you submit it, and it tells you if you're right or wrong. Um, so here's this little section on, personality. We used to use ink blots, watch a couple of videos, here's some more information about the big five, a couple more interactives, take a few personality tests, so go click on these things to go to some tests. And then, ask questions like, how many tests did you complete? Like the big I there looking at them. There's been research that shows if you have an I, people tend not to cheat as much. So I've got this I, how many tests did you find? And then I try to also weave in resources from the university. So, for help with assignments 2 and 3, read these things from the Business Career Hub. And so like I try to integrate kind of content from, we've got all these support staff at our university that students kind of just ignore. And so, you can, here's something from the university about the importance of knowing your strengths and how do you identify your strengths and how do you leverage your strengths. And, so there's all this content from the university that I, try to pull into the course.